Good. Edwina, would you like to unmute and introduce yourself? Unmute. Unmute.
I'm Edwina Cairo. I'm the co-chair of the Valley Area Command Community Policing Council.
Jacqueline, can you introduce?
Hi. Hi. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm Jacqueline Polly-Ritz, and I'm part of the Valley Community Policing Council.
Dick, are you there?
Shooting as it was taking place, and he, which is it's unbelievable. He also got on the radio and let us know, us as a
Unbelievable, also.
what was happening. Which is
Tom, why don't you introduce yourself first, and then?
And in many ways.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Officer Rebecca is still recovering in the hospital tonight, and Johnny told us he cannot wait to visit him, but he had this.
Watching TV.
He's got a mic on.
Whoever's got that going on, can they turn my mic off, please?
He's done for us as a community.
Today we also heard from the police service aide credited with.
Thank you. So Tom cannot hear us. If you could check into that, Kelly. Dick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll start.
Young woman, she works with officers on a daily basis in a
Oh.
Hey, who else is talking now?
saves one of their lives, and that officer.
It sounds like a radio show or a radio announcement or a cop radio. Okay, Dick.
Yeah, I'm Dick Winterbottom. I'm a member of the CPC.
And Tom, I guess, still can't hear us, so I hope that he'll get to it, but it's Mr. Tom O'Keefe. He's also a member of our council. So tonight, we decided to talk about officer safety. And by officer, we mean everyone. We don't just mean the rank and file, for want of a better term. We mean the commanders, the sergeants, the lieutenants, anybody who has to put themselves out there. So, and I want to preface tonight by saying how relieved I am that the officer that was shot above his bulletproof vest is doing well, and that the other officers are okay. And how relieved I am that the reactions were so quick and the reflexes were so good that it didn't turn out to be the worst thing.
There, I got it.
Okay, Tom.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm trying a new device here because my laptop has poor sound quality, and this one, it's just an iPad, but I couldn't unmute myself. Now I'm unmuted. Sorry.
Okay. So I already introduced you, but if you want to introduce yourself again.
You did a great job. Thank you.
Okay. Well, before we start, I guess, even though we don't really do Roberts, let's do a motion to call the meeting to order. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, vote aye.
Aye. Aye.
So moved. And then can I have a motion to approve the agenda, which was just displayed on the screen to the side and was sent out earlier on?
I so move.
Second.
Okay. Motion passes. Old business, we don't have any to speak of. New business, we need to start working on recommendations. This is an ideal, we have this wherewithal. Sorry about the cat. We have this wherewithal to make specific recommendations to APD for changes in practices and policies. So I want everybody to be thinking about those and be really grateful. That's it. So we have a huge panel, which is a great good thing, which means that all of us really care about the safety of our police force. And so let me introduce them each, and then they can speak briefly to the issue, the topic. So first of all, we have Commander Renee McDermott. Welcome, Commander McDermott. Welcome to our city and welcome to the Academy. So if you'd like to say something very briefly, feel free.
Thank you, Rowan. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I worked here in Albuquerque back a few years ago when I was with the FBI, and I've always wanted to come back. So I really enjoy the area, the culture, the people, the city, and I look forward to being on the council, or listening to the council and helping address any issues, questions, and or concerns that anyone may have. I will caveat, I'm in my 3rd week, so I may not have very many answers, but Lieutenant Tapia will address those for the council as necessary. But thank you for the opportunity to be on the meeting, and look forward to the rest of them. Thank you.
Then we have Commander Brown, who's moved into a new position. Do you have anything, if you give a brief introductory to who you are and your new position?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Josh Brown. I was formerly your commander in the Valley. I'm now the interim deputy chief over field services. So thanks for having me tonight.
And then Lieutenant Amanda Tapia.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm Amanda Tapia, and I'm one of the lieutenants here at the Police Academy. I currently oversee the career development program and the field training and evaluation program. So hopefully I'll do my best to answer any questions you have related to training and officer safety.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Commander Scott Norris.
Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Norris. I'm the commander over the Valley Area Command. I've been here almost 2 months. So I've had the pleasure and the privilege of attending one Valley CPC meeting that was on the 22nd of last month. So this is my 2nd one.
And Lieutenant Jennifer Garcia.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Garcia. I'm lieutenant of the community engagement section. I also oversee recruiting backgrounds and our ambassador program.
Okay. And last but not least, Detective Sean Willoughby.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Willoughby. I'm the president of the Albuquerque Police Officers Association. I'm just happy to be here, a part of the conversation, answer any questions. And just for the CPC board, I know Rowan, we've been working together for a long time. Got a lot of respect for her and her leadership on this council. If there's ever a time, if there's ever any questions, you're welcome to call me. I'll do everything I can to make it to a meeting, and I'm always available.
I'd just like to mention that Sean and I are more often than not polar opposites in our opinions.
100%.
100%. So
if there was a percentage for more than 100, it would be that.
But we work together well. So I changed the topic of tonight's meeting in the light of last week's events. It seemed important to talk about safety of our police force, which in turn leads to the public safety. And so I suppose the best place to start would be with Lieutenant Tapia, as you oversee the field area training. So if you could go into a little detail about the kind of training that you do.
Yeah, so thank you. I think it's important to remember that the training the officers get begins in the basic training academy. So one of the priorities is obviously officer safety, and that concept is woven within every portion of their training. So from day one of the academy, there's a focus towards officer safety and incorporating that in every lesson plan that they do have. In addition to that, there's also very specific training related to officer safety. So things like room clearing, dealing with the first aid and medical response, so CPR, applying chest seals, applying tourniquets, room clearing, building clearing, clearing vehicles, dealing with felony stops or high risk stops. And then at the end of the basic training academy, they also get an additional week, which is focused on officer preparedness training, which is an intense week where all of their skills are put together and culminate towards working with topics like shooting and moving around barricades, threat assessment identification, communication, and shooting from various positions, you know, all of which have come into play in several police involved shootings and other safety situations. Training doesn't just end there. You know, they go to the advanced training where we do regularly have officer safety training courses. And, you know, I'm proud to announce that this administration recently created the career development program, which is where I'm housed, and that focus is providing optional training to officers to continue building their knowledge, skills, and abilities in a wide variety of things, including officer safety. So that's kind of a quick overview and what we do, and also including, like I said, the reality-based training where we can put a lot of the knowledge that we learn in the classroom, put it to use and apply those skills in a scenario-based environment.
So after the academy, they have how long of a drive along before they're ready to be riding along in their own cars, doing their own beats?
Yeah, so our field training and evaluation program is a minimum of 17 weeks of training where they ride alongside with another officer, one of our experienced officers, our field training officers. And the way that's broken out is out to 4 different phases with 4 different trainers working different shifts, different areas of the city.
Oh, so they don't just get assigned to one area command, they go.
No, so part of the CASA agreement and in terms of best practices for the city is ensuring that, you know, we acclimate them and prepare them for a variety of situations. So the dynamics of working day shift, graveyard, or swing shift in various area commands really bring different challenges and experiences. So having them ride with these different officers, learn different ways to approach calls is really to help build their skill sets as best as possible.
What about crime scenarios? Are they presented with, I know you said there was some reality-based training, but is that a constant thread through the training, or is it specific to, like, it seems to me that the use of force training and the reality-based training seem to address safety more than any other. But is that not the case? Is there other specific courses that also cover safety out there?
Yes, so I think it's important to remember when it comes to officer safety, there's 2 different aspects of it. There's the skills, or there's the knowledge aspect where we're teaching the information that people need to know to understand these concepts. The second part of that is the skills, and that's going to be the practical application in performing what they've now learned in a classroom setting. So in the academy, our cadets get 4 phases of reality-based training. The first 3 are 2 days of reality-based training, and then as part of the officer preparedness week, they do 1 set where it's set out the range, and they work on those skills, and then the following week is an entire week of reality-based training, again, in a variety of circumstances where we do scenarios of different types of calls, so domestic violence, traffic stops, you know, on-site activity, responding to disturbances, a lot of things along those lines. So, and then that doesn't just end there. Again, we have the reality-based training facility with Sergeant DeFreitas and his staff, which are amazing. They, you know, their commitment towards ensuring we're able to apply these skills on an ongoing basis, you know, shows their dedication to training. And right now we're actually working on Tier 4 use of force training, which is all reality-based training related.
Okay, there is a comment from a Zachariah Smith that it is important that your first priority we take as a given is our safety, civilian safety, and that sometimes we seem to be seen as an imminent threat. And to quote Mr. Smith says, we're people, not some jihadist militants. Sometimes there is an adversarial relationship, but you don't go into that in the training, or do you? Do you talk about civilian safety constantly? Is that a constant thread also in the training, or is there a specific course?
Yes, so no, absolutely. That's included in all of our training. And I think it's important to remember that, you know, we're part of this community too. So I'm born in Albuquerque, born and raised. I grew up over off Coors and Gun Club. My family lives in all parts of the city. So their safety, your safety, and our safety should all be the same commitment. And, you know, whether that's, you know, you're in a dangerous situation at any point, we're here to work for you and help ensure that we can keep you safe as well. And I think officer safety goes hand in hand with civilian safety.
We, I took the CPA course a long time ago, about 5 years ago, I think. And I'm aware that there must have been some considerable changes and turnovers in the academy since that time. How long have you been with the academy, Lieutenant Tapia?
So I have been, so I recently came on board in April of this year as part of the career development program. Now I was the field training coordinator beginning in, let's see, in 2017, from 2017 until I promoted in 2019. So I oversaw our field training and evaluation program for those 2 years, again, working really closely with our basic staff and our advanced training staff.
Have you seen any key changes based on events that happened from 2017 till now?
I think we've learned, you know, what we've learned in terms of training is the importance of our reality-based training center and the ability to not just teach in a static classroom environment, but go out and actually apply these skills, learn where maybe there's performance deficiencies in a training environment so that we can then improve and get better to provide better service when we are out on the streets.
Okay. Can you think of anything else that might have changed in the last, well, 4 years since 2017? The academy's mission and purpose?
There's nothing I can think of offhand. Like I said, I know when I first started here at the academy, we didn't have a reality-based training center. It was just extra, it was a collateral duty, and we took volunteers from around the department, and really infusing that into much more of our training, I think has improved our performance.
Mr. Willoughby.
Yes, ma'am.
As a representative of the officers, and as part of it, could you address some of the contract language that that relates directly to safety?
So we have the ability within the contract to file what's called a prohibited practice complaint when there's any substantive reason why we are concerned, either a change or new equipment might cause an officer safety issue. I will say this, that when it comes to officer safety and equipment, the Albuquerque Police Department is pretty well equipped and pretty responsive to hearing I mean, my concerns in regards to officer safety are much more global. They don't really relate to training, or they don't relate to equipment or not having the necessary equipment. We're lucky in Albuquerque. You know, our OBRD system is second to none. It's a very high quality OBRD system.
Say what that is?
They are on-body recording system. We have a multitude of less lethal options and force arrays to be, you know, just as concerned about our community and our own personal safety, to try to de-escalate situations that would otherwise be, you know, we would be stuck with just having firearms. We get good response, and I'll give you an example. We just changed the radio system. It was a massive changeover. The radio system is completely different. We've got new handheld radios, and there's safety features in that handheld radio where if an officer is on his back or an officer is down, over a certain period of seconds, it will alert both dispatch and surrounding officers. That is a good system, but one of our concerns was that The system was a little more complicated. And for our detective units have sometimes a vehicle that doesn't have a car radio. So they're communicating with each other and they're listening to a dispatched air at the same time. And they're constantly having to move back and forth in channels. And when seconds matter and real stuff is going on, that's an unrealistic expectation. So, you know, we talked to the department about it, and they were able to rectify our concerns under the premise of officer safety. So, you know, I criticize the department often, but when it comes to officer safety, genuine officer safety issues, I will say that they're pretty responsive to making sure that our officers have the best equipment and they have the tools that they need to safely do the job, both for the community and themselves. Now, I mean, I can go on a little bit, but so basically you asked about the contract. So, you know, if I wasn't able to move that needle, let's say the department was not responsive in providing an additional radio for a detective who doesn't have a car radio, then I would use an element within our labor system in the city of Albuquerque called a PPC, a prohibited practice complaint. And I would file litigation against the city to be reviewed and basically looked upon from the labor board that this change in working conditions caused an unsavory labor condition and an officer safety issue, and it needs to be rectified immediately. So we have confines within our contract to file that prohibited practice complaint as an administrative remedy, to have a third body look at the situation and make a ruling that the city of Albuquerque must adhere to. So that's what we would do from a labor standpoint, using our contract to try to ensure that a practice or a business practice or something that's going on in the department is rectified on behalf of officer safety.
Okay. Lieutenant Garcia, as the outreach person for APD, what do you see your role as in relation to officer safety?
Well, as outreach, I believe that we need to work together. We're here to work with the community to make Albuquerque better. It's not something that law enforcement can do on their own. We need to work collaboratively, and that is officer safety. I mean, our relationships with the community determine how safe we are, how safe the civilians are, as evidenced by a civilian helped our officer last week because of hopefully positive interactions he has had with law enforcement, and recognizing that everything here, it's a bigger issue than just us. We can't police our city without the help of our citizens. So we need to work with them to make us more safe, to make them more safe, and to make the city more safe as a whole.
Okay. Can you address, I know it might be a bit of a tangent, but can you address the ambassador program and describe it and describe how it's working in the community?
Absolutely. So the ambassador program began full throttle May 5th of this year. We have right now 18 officers. It's a collateral assignment. They're assigned to 10 different groups, different communities that may have not had a voice with law enforcement in the past. The role is to serve as the liaison between those groups and the police department for training. And when I say training, please understand that's not necessarily training of the community. A lot of that is training our officers on how to work with certain groups or learn certain things that we may not know about specific communities when working with the communities. Oftentimes we forget, we stick together within our own circle, and we may forget things that we don't see because it's natural to us. We're not here to push our voice onto the community. We're here to listen to their voice and help, I guess, provide a better relationship with them. The ambassadors also coordinate with the cadet classes with basic training to have speakers from each of these groups have lunch with the cadets to talk to them a little bit about relationships in the past. It started with our African-American community, and they started working with the chief, which is how this program has developed. And now we have improved some of our relationships with the African-American community. We've also worked a lot with the Asian community, LGBTQ+. For the first time, we were allowed to attend the Pride event this weekend and have a recruiting booth. No law enforcement entity has ever been participated in the Pride Fest, at least not here in New Mexico. So we're just trying to improve relationships. And then the other role is to help recruit persons from these communities, because we want the department to be representative of the community we serve.
Thank you. I've been hearing about the ambassador program for a really long time, but I hadn't had full clarification. And that also goes a long way towards trust and safety, I assume, that once you come on to get to know certain communities and groups, then they will feel more comfortable with the police and will work with them better. I'm sorry, this cat is just... She's not dead. She's fine. Oh God. Commander Brown, apologies for not giving you your full title. It's such a mouthful. Would you like to speak to the Field Area Bureau and how you see your role in safety, which isn't obvious, which is a given, but just in the interest of clarification?
Sure. So, in the last 21 years, we've had great strides in training. We've seen different philosophies come and go. One of the things I do believe is that a well-trained officer is less likely to use excessive force or overreact in a situation where, an officer who doesn't have as much training might not have the available tools and resources to verbally either de-escalate someone or take the appropriate action. A lot of it's stress inoculation. I mean, a lot of officers right now are stressed to the point where, they're going from calls to service. Our call volume has gone through the roof. They're already at a stress point. So the more we can do in our training aspect and the more wellness that we can provide our officers, the better they're going to be. I saw one of the comments, the war on officers, is the war on cop style language. And, we used to have the language in our training years ago was that, I don't remember how it was said exactly, but it was that warrior mentality. And, the more that we've gotten through training and, the different mindsets, that's really changed a lot as far as how our officers are responding to different calls. I mean, we talk about officer safety. I mean, it goes to multiple different things. We've got, mental health concerns for our officers, substance abuse concerns for our officers. All these things play a role in an officer safety issue. Do they feel supported by the department? Are they treated fairly and with respect? And I think that also goes into the portion of their training. And it comes from us as a chain of command as well. So, I mean, I try to instill in my officers that, I work for them and I work for the citizens of Albuquerque. And, I'm there to support and get whatever training they need. I've never turned down a training request. The only time that I've ever turned down a training request has been over COVID, when we couldn't do out-of-state training and travel and stuff like that. But in my 21 years, I've been involved in pretty much every aspect of training, from defensive tactics, to firearms, to canine, SWAT tactics, basic officer safety stuff. And I think you look at it as in training, there's multiple different levels, kind of like Lieutenant Tapia said. You have your basic officer safety skills. What do you need to know to go out and safely do your job? How do you communicate with your fellow officer? How do you take calls? They get a lot of that when they're OJT phase, and a lot of it they gain through experience. But they have a broader sense now of what they're doing as far as the training goes. It's not that combat training anymore. It's more of de-escalation. It's more of how to properly articulate, you know, with someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis, how to de-escalate them safely. We have multiple things like MCT now, ECIT officers. So the training goes on and on. And each one of those segments of training helps in officer safety.
Can you break down the acronyms that you just said? I know you said ECIT is Enhanced Crisis.
So it's the Enhanced Crisis Intervention Team. So every officer in the department has CIT training. So the officers who are ECIT have just that little bit more. And, you know, so if an officer on a call is out with someone who is experiencing a mental health crisis, and, you know, it's kind of escalating to a point where, you know, it's getting a little bit rowdy, they're able to rely on the ECIT officers or even the MCT officers. So the MCT is the Mobile Crisis Teams, which is an officer who's partnered with a clinician. Mm-hmm. And that kind of adds another layer of that in there. But all those officers are trained. And so when you look at the training as a whole, it encompasses a lot more than just this typical, you know, basics of what an officer receives in the academy. So.
Well, it doesn't always work out because there's one specific instance that happened in September last year at Clyde Trevino, that there wasn't an ECIT person present and there was an officer injury and there was a fatality. And we have requested that report repeatedly and not received it, the full report of what happened. But it happened. And I know you weren't area field command then, and I'm not sure that there's anyone here who can specifically address it. But we have just saying that it doesn't always work out, and we have requested a full report of that incident. We know that an officer was injured, but we don't know to what extent. And we know there wasn't an ECIT person present, and that does happen.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Sean. No, go ahead. I just wanted to add that we're one of the only departments in the country that has been dealing with CIT programs since its conception. It started in Memphis in the 80s, and we've had CIT training in the Albuquerque Police Department the entire career that I've been here on 18 years. And every single officer on the Albuquerque Police Department has a minimum of 40 hours crisis intervention training before they hit the streets of Albuquerque, which is a great deal more training than any departments in our surrounding area and any department within this region, to my knowledge. So CIT training's always been taken seriously by this department, and not only is it taken seriously, but we invest CIT training in our recruits before they graduate the academy.
This was a night for you guys to speak, and so far it seems obviously successful that you've had a chance to speak out about everything that you're doing for officer safety. I guess I have a question for Commander Norris, and for Sean too, I suppose, or for anybody who can answer this. As a teacher, after I got my licensure, I trained for something or other at least once a month. I had to leave my classroom and do training of some kind. How much post-academy training is there for the officers that are out on the street? And not just in use of force, but in reality-based training still, and other important factors that guarantee safety. Sean, take that.
You know, I think that when we're talking about reform, Albuquerque's somewhat fortunate. It's one of the benefits of being a part of a consent decree that we are ordered by the court to provide more training for our officers than most departments do. But I think it's really important to understand and comprehend the actual level of training of a police officer in this country. In the state of New Mexico, I believe that they get 80 hours of firearms training and 80 hours of defensive tactics training that they need to complete before they're given a gun and badge and go into communities. One of the arguments that I've always had in relation to reform is the lack of investment in actual training on a regular basis. Every day is a training opportunity because your sergeant's going to help you. You're going to go over policies and briefing. So you're constantly learning in a police department, but most police departments that are operating today do not have weekly or bi-weekly or monthly training criteria that their officers go through. Our officers are pretty inundated with training, whether it's online training or training from particular units because of Power DMS and the DOJ mandate. But one of the common misconceptions in the country on a general conversation basis is the level of training that most police officers have in this country and the lack thereof. And training is not an easy feat. It's definitely not easy for this police department. You know, one of the biggest officer safety concerns that the APOA has is staffing, and training causes a staffing nightmare, because when you're mandated to give training to the entire department, well, somebody has to perform the duties of those officers. It causes overtime. It causes adjusting of schedules. It's not easy to systematically train an entire department consistently just because of the staffing woes. So, I mean, it's a challenge. In Albuquerque, we're lucky. I've commonly said it's the benefit of being a part of a consent decree that we have been provided more training than a lot of departments that I have been to. But I think that as a profession in general, training could definitely be more extensive and on a regular basis. It's just finding the budget to do it and the staffing to make sure that it's done effectively, which is always a challenge, especially in Albuquerque.
So I still want to know, I know that I read some literature about other police forces in other parts of the country, and I'll go back to this again, that some police academies have the requirement of 60 college credit hours before someone can be part of a police academy. I know it used to be that some college credit hours were required, and that was removed. And Lieutenant Tapia, it seems awful to land that in your lap, or maybe Lieutenant Nico if he's still here, but Commander McDermott is so new that perhaps she's not ready to address that. Can you say why college credits aren't a requirement? I know they were, but why aren't they a requirement anymore?
Yeah, so, and I think it's important to consider that college requirements do bring in a little bit of time and a little bit of knowledge and experience that new people bring. However, that, you know, college credits alone simply don't necessarily make a great cop. So, you know, I'll tell you, I actually started the police department as a police service aide when I was 19 years old. So when I look at that, I didn't have a lot of life experience, didn't have a lot of college under my belt at the time, and learning and going through that process, being able to learn the skills, the knowledge and skills that were important in the police academy, learning that through the mentorship of OJT and senior officers and sergeants really helped build that knowledge infrastructure. So in order to ensure that we are reaching a wider base of people within the community, not excluding simply because you don't have college training hours, providing you with the training, providing you with the mentorship, and preparing people who have the right heart for policing for our community and giving them the training that they need to be successful.
So you said that college credits don't reflect experience. So when people apply, what are you looking for in terms of experience? So in working with our recruiting department, I don't know if Lieutenant Garcia, if you want to talk a little bit about that. I know for me, it's really about having the right heart to help the community and want to make this place better. That's something that's important to me. But Lieutenant Garcia, would you like to talk a little bit more about recruiting?
Sure. So I want to piggyback on what Lieutenant Tapia said, is that, you know, a lot of it's about life experience. Having college, you do have some life experience, but it's still somewhat isolated. If you have somebody that maybe was in the military, they have a lot of experience, and because they chose to do that, you don't want to exclude them for somebody that was living in a dormitory room or living with their parents and going to school. Everybody is individual, and we don't want to exclude anybody based on one general assessment or idea that having college makes you a better candidate for law enforcement. Also in college, you can learn, you can go different tracks. Is an engineer going to be better than maybe a social worker or somebody that went that track? You don't necessarily know that. So everybody needs to be judged individually. There is a process to be accepted into the department. And we have had college credits in the past or college mandates in the past. I personally have a master's degree. I do not think that that makes me a better officer than anybody else. Some of the best officers I know have a GED and they have some life experience. They're better at talking to people. So it's dependent on the individual, like Lieutenant Tapia said, their passion for the community and what's in their heart.
Just throwing this one out, it does take more training to be a barber than it takes to be a police officer. Just throwing that one out. It does take more than that. And massage therapist needs more, it gets more training than a police officer. It just sometimes gets a little disturbing if they're really young. And I understand about PSAs, how they move up into the academy and get the necessary training. But young, inexperienced officers can make some terrible missteps sometimes. And all the training in the world might not change that. I mean, they may go through the academy fine, they may go through the drive along thing fine, and then suddenly when they're left in a car on their own, I'm just coming up with the worst case scenario. Whereas somebody who's got a little more gravitas, who's had a little more college experience, may be stronger and more mature.
The other problem, ma'am, with a college experience is, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's a very good point. That, I mean, it takes, the city of Albuquerque is a little different. I believe our academy, Lieutenant, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 26 or 27 weeks in the city of Albuquerque. The state post-test for law enforcement is 16 weeks. We invest more training in high school athletes and a 4-year high school degree career than we do in a lot of officers throughout this country. There's more extensive training in Albuquerque for obvious reasons, and there always has been. Long before the DOJ, my academy was 26, 27 weeks, and the state post was 16. But that being said, there was an opinion piece that was written several years ago that connected a college education to the hypothesis that a college educated individual was less likely by percentage to use force than somebody who wasn't in college. There's not been since any data to clarify that or rectify that. And a lot of departments went in that direction and found themselves up a creek without a paddle, because the law enforcement pay is not relative of most folks that are seeking a profession after a college degree. And they're very selective also. Like all these folks that we're hiring, whether they have a GED, a high school diploma, or a college degree, they all have this great new tool called Google, and they can pick and choose where they want to go as a profession, professional liability and challenges that may face certain communities, and choose to go to a different area. The whole profession of law enforcement in this country is having a really, really hard time recruiting in general. And I believe that when we had the requirement for degrees, our recruiting went down exponentially, and they needed to respond to that by hiring, getting more people that are qualified and have the heart to do this job through the process. Myself, I've got a little bit of college. I graduated with the GED. I was blessed to become a police officer. I absolutely love the job, and I was a pretty good cop. That being said, you know, when it comes to officer safety, on top of the training and everything that we're talking about, the number one issue that I think we have in Albuquerque and we're having throughout the country is literally staffing. It's staffing the police department. It's the level of call volume, the explosion of violent crime that we've seen, coupled with the responsibilities in different areas of the police department that we have to staff and we have to manage. And, you know, the police officer job, we have less officers, we're asking more work. You know, I've criticized the department in the past. I keep waiting, and it's nobody in this room's ability to enforce it, but the CPC may be able to help. We need an actual, almost a forensic accounting staffing study in the city of Albuquerque Police Department. There's been an excess of administrative burden on the Albuquerque police officers as it relates to the reform effort. It didn't used to be that when somebody said ow without force being used, that an elongated investigation rigorously had to take place. It didn't used to be in the city of Albuquerque Police Department that overcoming any level of resistance in handcuffing a subject is a investigation for a use of force. So what we've done is, as we're going through this reform effort, what we've never done is we've never really deep down analyzed the jobs that our police officers are doing as it relates to the administrative increase of burden. And the question of what everybody in CPC wants to know is, how do we also address crime at the same time? And I think that most individuals, regardless of what side of the fence you're on, would be shocked to know what the number of police officers we would actually need to be effective at both. And it's a constant challenge, not only for the city of Albuquerque Police Department, but for police departments all over this country. The city of Houston is the only department that I have any documentation of, which I got from the monitoring team, oddly enough, of what that type of staffing study looks like. And they actually audited every single officer to the level of, how long does it take to write a warrant? How long does it take for you to track down a drudge to get it signed? How long does it take for you to fill up gas in your car? How long does it take for you to do a case from start to finish? And based on that average, how many officers do we need to make an effective, meaningful impact of that crime category? Our staffing studies in the city of Albuquerque Police Department are done. They're online, you can get them, but they're done a very old school. It's landmass, number of calls, amount of time on a call. This is how many officers you need if you want them to be proactive for this amount of time. And that doesn't really cut it in the city of Albuquerque with the increased administrative burden. And the biggest challenge that we face is my biggest concern with officer safety. It's staffing, and it's staffing everywhere, from investigative units to field service units to being understaffed in internal affairs. The Albuquerque Police Department is significantly understaffed in every actual attribute of this police department. And it affects officer safety every single day.
Well, I have to commend the department for, even though they are dealing with a horrible staffing situation and they are short-staffed, that their proactivity, particularly in last week's incident, is beyond impressive. That they can handle things. They can handle the urgent, the horrible things. Perhaps the general crime issues are harder to handle. But when there's serious crisis, I'm sorry, there was a gentleman looking on my porch to see if I had a package or not.
Come on.
That's interesting.
Call the cops and order food and see what reaches you first.
No, I had an Amazon huge box delivered earlier on today, and he just pulled up to look on the porch, I guess to see if it was still there. Huh. Wow, because I'm not visible from the streets. So should I call the police, Commander Norris, or should I just let it go? You're muted.
242 cops, ma'am.
You want me to do that just to report it?
Sure, because you're not the only house he's going to do that to.
Wow. Wow. That was really interesting. Not necessarily about safety, but still really interesting. I will call 242 cops. For it to be happening right now is really weird. Commander Norris, I was beginning to ask you a question a long time ago. I apologize for the divergent. What do you see as your role as an area commander in promoting officer safety?
Well, that's my first priority, is promoting officer safety. And that may even go up to the point to where I'm not going to allow officers to go on scene on a call if they don't have the proper backup or proper equipment on them until they get that proper backup. Obviously, it just kind of depends on the nature of the call that we're going to. But I'm going to have to be one of those ones that in the event that an officer gets hurt, God forbid gets shot, I'm going to be the one that has to tell their family. It's the last thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do everything in my power to prevent that from happening. So the measures that we take to, promote officer safety are just like anything else. I mean, believe me, it's not a rah-rah talk every briefing about officer safety and make sure we're out there being safe. Everybody understands what they need to do to be safe. Sometimes you have to save an officer from himself because of that officer's motivation to maybe go and intervene in a situation where he doesn't have the proper necessary backup so he can handle that call safely, and can make that call even more unsafe. So those are the types of things that we talk about when we talk about officer safety. Officer safety is all encompassing. Officer safety also includes make sure that you're handling yourself in a professional manner so you don't wind up in internal affairs getting investigated for your behavior. That is also officer safety. We're looking at not just the safety of the life of officers, but we're looking at the safety of their career as well, career preservation. So those are the types of things that we talk about as well.
Could you define what the proper backup would be?
No, I cannot, because it's call to call. It really kind of depends on the type of call that you're going to, would determine, and the factors of that call would determine what type of backup, what type of additional officers we need, what type of additional resources we need in the way of a force array, in the way of air support, in the way of an ECIT officer. So there is no one perfect definition of backup, because every call is different and every call requires something different from us.
That was actually what I meant. That was the perfect answer to my question. That was pretty much what I meant, that you know to level off and deal with situations appropriately or as called for. Commander Brown, as Area Command Bureau, as Chief of the Area Command Bureau, how does your job work? Do you get daily reports? Do you go to command? Do you go to field meetings? How does your position, in what supervisory position are you? Over the commanders, obviously?
So I oversee all 6 area commands, which includes the commanders down to the PSAs. It covers anything from getting that information out to the commanders as far as updates for policy, training, ensuring that the training requirements have been met. We have certain checkpoints through the department that have to be met on a certain period of time. I went from being an officer to a manager, and my job is kind of like a baseball manager, just making sure that all the pieces on the field are working as they should. We oversee multiple operations as far as crime suppression operations. We had Commander Norris did a great job with our downtown operation. Right now we moved that into the foothills. It's monitoring crime stats. We have the weekly Duke City stat, where each week the commanders come in and present a Duke City stat, and we kind of assess where they're at, and we look at all of their crime statistics, and it falls all the way down into compliance scores, and just kind of monitoring how they're doing overall. And so, I mean, you were a teacher, so I'll equate it to kind of like the principal who oversees the teachers, who oversee the students. It's kind of the same role, just making sure that that things keep running smoothly. But the biggest thing we've had, I think, we've kind of changed how we look at the you know, we don't have as much like a comp stat like New York City and some of the other departments do. I'm not there to do the aha, I got you to my commanders. I'm there to work with them. I was in their shoes not too long ago, and I know that the stresses that they get having to deal with areas within their area command. You know, guidance and additional resources is my main focus, and seeing what we can do to alleviate some of their manning issues. I mean, today, you know, Commander Norris called me today with some staffing concerns. I was able to take care of some of those. It's still not complete, 100% completely what it should be, but it's just, you know, it's putting out fires on a daily basis.
Were you on the scene of the shooting last week?
I was.
So that's also a part of your job. When there's something serious like that, you're called out to the scene.
It did. So when I got to the scene, we had, you know, I think when I first got there, there was just a handful of officers on scene. The biggest thing that I did was coordinate with state police, the multiple agencies that were arriving. You know, we had different chiefs of police calling from different agencies, sheriffs, FBI, like every acronym law enforcement agency you could think of was sending officers. One of my jobs is, you know, the officers and the commanders and the sergeants and the officers on the field were doing a great job running that scene. My job is to coordinate kind of behind that and make sure they get what they want, and also keep people out of their hair. When our guys are in the midst of a critical incident, they don't need people asking a million questions. If I can see that they're running it competently and thoroughly, my job is to make sure they get the resources that they need available. And you know, I've done it my entire career. If you have a chief show up or somebody show up and they're no help, find a job. If it's blocking traffic, go block traffic. But my job on scene was just to make sure the commanders got what they needed on scene. The tactical response was there. I actually walked Officer Kinney to my truck and put him in my truck before he was transported to the hospital. You know, when you have that many bodies on scene, you know, you kind of pick and choose what your response is going to be based on what's going on. You know, out there we had tactical officers, we had area commanders, we had, you know, down to the frontline officers, plus all these other agencies coming online. And, you know, that's a big coordinated mess. You know, one of the things we did was I had them create 3 different staging points. We had investigations showing up who were unmarked, who were going to follow up and do the investigation side afterwards. We had marked units. We had federal agencies showing up. And kind of one of the things that Sean was talking about earlier was, you know, we were really lucky on this incident that we got the new radio systems that we have, to where we can now tie in to, like, you know, if somebody has like state police before, I mean, I've been on for 21 years, and when I started my career, I went to tactical, and we used to deploy all over the state with them. And we never had the same radio communications with each other. The state police officers that were stationed in Albuquerque didn't have our radio communications. I mean, it creates a problem when you're trying to do mutual aid with each other. And one of the benefits of the new radio system that we have now is able to, you know, they were just able to switch over. Sunday, whenever we had, not Sunday, I'm sorry. So Friday, so the bulk of those officers came out of one squad. And again, this kind of goes down to what my job is to manage staffing levels and making sure that things get covered. And so while they were doing that, I'm already planning on how we're going to staff that squad. And, you know, thankfully I talked to Tim Johnson, the chief of state police. He was on scene. He asked me what I needed. I asked him if I could have 4 officers who could work foothills all day Friday. So we had state police officers answering calls for service on our air with their own radios, that we didn't have to make some special patch or do anything like that, and just kind of coordinate that stuff, so that, you know, our quality of calls for service didn't go down. And yeah, it was a scene. It was a big scene. It lasted a while.
I have to say that, when was it? How many years ago was it that gentleman went crazy and shot police and gave chase all over up 4th Street and over on, that
was the Christopher Chase incident? That was 2012, 11. It's been over 10 years ago, I think. It's been a while.
I happened to be driving up 4th at the time. I got there by mistake. I have no excuse. I suddenly was in the middle of 4th, and I realized that it was completely empty. There was no cars there at all. And I realized that I shouldn't be there. And I got out pretty quickly. But I was very impressed with how quickly the scene was cleared. And I assume that the scene was cleared just as quickly in this Dutch Brothers incident also, which is an amazing, complex series of logistics, particularly on a crowded street like Wantabo, or so on a crowded street like Forth. But how quickly was it done? It seemed to be done I know it was done very fast in the incident that I got into by accident, but how quickly was it done on Wantabo?
I'm not sure about the overall time. I mean, there was different levels of investigation that occurred. I mean, we were still on scene for a number of hours looking for the second suspect who ran, the one that went out on the video and the pictures. The actual,
How quickly were the public removed from the scene?
Oh, how quickly were they removed from the scene?
Yeah.
Oh, about a minute. Minutes.
That's what I thought. And that's
it didn't take very long. They had it locked down. They had it locked down from about I think it was Indian School to Lomas, and then west to I can't remember the street, but they had it locked down in probably
Eubank.
5 minutes. Yeah.
To Eubank and then to Tramway. Oh no. Well, that was, I mean, I was not proud of myself driving down Forth that day, but very impressed with how quickly the scene had been cleared, because I'd only just heard about it on the radio about 15 minutes before. Do any of the other council members have questions? Go, Jacqueline.
Sean, this is a question for you. I am very concerned about recruitment, and it seems like there's a tie-in between staffing and safety, of course. So I'm wondering if being very public about CASA and paperwork, it might be affecting our recruitment.
Oh yeah, guaranteed. Are you talking about the APOA being public?
Yes, yes. I'm wondering how much that being very public and very like saying this is horrible how police officers have to work, how helpful that is towards recruitment.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I appreciate you appreciate the time to allow me to answer. It's important to understand how the APOA is structured. I'm a non-voting member of this organization. As the president, I don't carry a vote. I have over 25 board members that represent different areas of the police department. And I represent the rank and file, the police officers that work in this agency, to be the voice of Albuquerque police officers in situations that they're concerned about. Being public about how Albuquerque police officers feel, although it's inconvenient, it's the truth. And I wouldn't be doing a very good job representing the Albuquerque police officers that elect me to do this job if I wasn't brutally honest. I am not going to, as unpopular as the position might be, or how it may anger some folks who disagree, I am not going to sit here before you and not be honest about how Albuquerque police officer feels. I'm running unopposed. I'll be doing this position for the next 2 years. Our Albuquerque police officers are struggling with several different challenges right now, a lot of which they don't really possess any control over. I think that when you talk about recruiting and you start to get to the truth of recruiting, you have 900 recruiters out there in uniform working for this police department that are telling their friends and family, do not go into law enforcement and do not work for the Albuquerque Police Department. It is a very deep challenge, but my job is not to work for recruiting. And my job is not to use commentary and stay out of the public eye on what would benefit the recruiting of the Albuquerque Police Department. My job is to be the voice of Albuquerque police officers and to represent the board of this organization, which are all sworn police officers to include supervisors. And that's what I try to do to the best of my ability. We work with, we have strategy sessions of our board every single week. We go over media content. We work with a professional PR firm because we're cops, not news people. And there is a lot of thought and care that goes into being the voice of Albuquerque police officers. As inconvenient and unpopular as that might be in certain segments of individual's opinion, I'm going to do the job that I'm instructed to do by the board of this agency and by the board of the APOA and the Albuquerque police officers that I represent. And that's my answer.
So it is affecting recruiting, however.
There's a lot of things affecting recruiting. Payment is one of them. The fact that we have a consent decree at all affects recruiting. Like we're not dealing with human beings who are not intelligent, or they wouldn't be police officers. We're not dealing with a segment of society that hasn't invested a great deal of thought before they put 25 years and a uniform on and sacrifice everything for their community. These are individuals that understand the challenges of Albuquerque. These are individuals that understand the challenges of a consent decree and the failures therein. These are individuals who, if they want to go into the area of law enforcement, are smart enough to do so in a manner that best suits them. So I would be willing to bet that the sediment of Albuquerque police officers, which is what you hear me say on the news on a regular basis, is definitely impacting recruiting. The best recruiter you have for the Albuquerque Police Department are the men and women that work here. That's a fact. It's always been that way in law enforcement. But I mean, we're doing a survey right now, and when 99% of the officers that respond to the survey encourage their kids not to be police officers at all and not to come to the Albuquerque Police Department, that means something. So the morale of the rank and file, the way that the employees feel supported, the way that the employees feel the department or the administration supports them and treats them, definitely impact recruiting. And it is definitely one of the challenges that Albuquerque faces as it relates to recruiting. And then you have the systematical pay in the region. Albuquerque is pretty well paid for this state. But in the region, we lag behind areas like Colorado Springs and some bigger departments in Texas and in Arizona and Phoenix. So compensation is definitely a definite concern that we have to undertake in recruiting. But, you know, like every single law enforcement officer that stands before you on this panel, I'd be willing to bet less than a quarter of their graduating academy class is still employed. I know that less than half of my graduating class is still on the Albuquerque Police Department. So as much as recruiting is a problem, retention is a bigger problem. We've lost an exponential amount of officers this year. Our natural attrition rate over the last 20 years is 60. Last year, we lost 81. We're breaching 100 right now of retirements and individuals leaving the profession altogether. Some of that number have been terminated. So I think Albuquerque's taken it from every single angle. Most of the chain of command and my colleagues would definitely tell you that the APOA's position on things can be detrimental to recruiting, but I'm elected to tell the truth, and that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. Anybody else on the council have a question? We need to pull back into safety, though that was a very valuable thing that you said, Sean. Dick, you need to unmute.
I'm sorry. I'd like to ask a few questions, if you don't mind. Lieutenant Tapia, you said that you were beginning stage 4 or tier 4 reality training at the academy. I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, so what we're currently working on at our reality-based training center is a tier 4 use of force training.
Okay. And you said that you're currently working on it. Are you training on it now?
Yes, so we're currently delivering that training 4 days a week. And we will have the entire department through that training by the end of the year.
When did you start?
We started earlier this month, I believe it was.
Okay. So why, I mean, the 13th report said that training on use of force was deficient in any reasonable and meaningful way. And that was pretty strong language. And it singled out a number of things. Identification of use of force, investigation of use of force, discipline of use of force, and training. And it's really good to hear that you finally got level 4, tier 4 training going. Why? I mean, as a citizen, the obvious question is, what took so long? 6 years.
Yeah, and I think what's important to remember is, so this tier 4 is a series of development and training that we've been doing. So, we had tiers 1, 2, 3. We had the first part of tier 4. And this is part of ongoing training that we've been providing. And as we receive feedback from the monitoring team, and as we receive feedback from officers and supervisors throughout the department, we continue to improve our training and take that feedback and create new training through a 7-step training process.
Great. Has the monitoring team been out since the tier 4 reality training began?
So the tier 4 training, the lesson plans were reviewed by the monitoring team and approved to be released and actually delivered as training. Like I said, I believe it was the beginning of this month that we started teaching this training and getting people through it. And we will be working on it when the monitoring team revisits the city in November.
So am I understanding you that you're now teaching the trainers on the levels 4?
So we are teaching officers and supervisors throughout the department. So all sworn personnel are going through this training.
So that the trainers are already trained and in place?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the monitoring team hasn't seen that the some effect of that yet. They haven't monitored that level 4 tier training.
So they have reviewed and approved the lesson plan to deliver for training, but no, they have not yet. We have not yet reported the results of that training.
Now, as I understand, let me preface this for all the officers, and I mean, we want, as a citizens group, we want to end CASA. Mr. Willoughby and I are on the same page on wanting to end CASA. We just maybe wanted to go about it a little differently. And I want it because I wanted to end it because you're in compliance. And that's what every citizen wants, I think. And so we're with you on that. And I mean, that's amazing. That's breakthrough information for me. Do you at the Academy train supervisors also, or are supervisors trained within the department and not in the Academy?
Yes, so we do take care of supervisor training at the Academy too. So for those of you that are familiar with the paragraphs of the CASA, that is covered under paragraphs 209, 210, and 211. The CASA mandates that we have 40 hours of supervisor training for new and incoming supervisors. And then we have an additional 32 hours of training annually for supervisors. Okay. That being said, again, APD looks to go above and beyond that. And we run as an initial supervisory training course. It's an 80-hour course, which involves classroom training, practical application, as well as 2 days of reality-based training to put those skills to use at the beginning. And then in addition to that, every newly promoted sergeant does a 2-month on-the-job training stint where they work 1 month with one supervisor in a portion of the city. The second month is with a different sergeant working a different shift, a different area of the city, again, to expose them to the various situations that may arise for a supervisor.
How long has that training regimen been in effect?
So we have been doing, we've been doing a supervisor training course since before I got promoted. So before CASA existed. Now, in terms of it being a rigorous training, looking at analyzing what is a field supervisor's responsibility and how do we best apply adult learning theories in terms of gaining content and applying that to make sure they're best prepared. We've been constantly updating that over the last several years.
As I read the monitor's report, one problem with the CASA compliance was the fact that supervisors weren't adequately trained. I don't know if Commander McDermott or you read it that same way, but I think it was pretty clear. What changes have you made since the 13th report to get us up to speed?
So a little bit about my background. So my background, I've worked in the field my entire career, with the exception of the time I worked here in the field training program, where I actually oversaw the supervisor training at the time. And then I went back to the field, worked as a, so I worked as a supervisor, sergeant in the field, working all shifts. And then I worked as a lieutenant in the field for the past 2 years. So portions of what, through discussions and through reading and conversations with the monitors and understanding this, is that we've recognized some of the training, while it works in a static environment, we want to make sure that it's translating to real life application. So getting that feedback and having been in that position, we're looking at ways that we can continue to improve it. And actually, we are in the process of updating our supervisor training prior to redelivering it.
Okay, that's great. I hope it works. Does the academy train the people who investigate use of force complaints, or are they detectives who are trained by, I don't know, the detective agencies?
Did you want to answer, Sean? What that was?
I don't know if the lieutenant, and I don't mean to take any of your time, but I know, for instance, sir, one of the frustrations that we've had as the APOA is they just completed internal affairs, IA Force approved investigation training last week. So there has been it's not easy to get training done. Just so you understand, we are involved in the most bureaucratic process you could ever even comprehend. So every attribute of training that gets accomplished by the City of Albuquerque Police Department needs to get approved by a ton of people, and comments need to be used and changes need to be made. We've been waiting on search and seizure training for more than a year. The internal affairs training policy that just came into effect last week, I believe we've been working on that training for more than 24 months. It's been our chief got it done. The last administration tried to get it done. It's been through 2 or 3 commanders. This is not an easy process. And you said one thing that kind of concerned me, that Tier 4 didn't take 6 years to get through. We have mandatory use of force training as it relates to our job that the CASA requires us to do a certain block every single year. So we were exponentially behind schedule last year, and it was largely, I know that this is going to sound like an excuse, but it was largely because of COVID. We were not allowed to do in-person training. Our cadets had to be 6 feet apart and no defensive tactics. We weren't allowed to convene at the same time. We're dealing with, over 250 sworn Albuquerque police members that were sick.
Mr. Willoughby, that's why I'm focusing on the president. All right. Yeah. I'm talking about what is being done since the 13th report. post-COVID, or at least.
I just didn't want you to think it took us 6 years to do that one evolution of training. That was not correct.
It's been 6 years, all right? Whether it took you 6 years or somebody else took you 6 years, it's been 6 years. Now, I wouldn't care about that. I don't care if it takes 6 years. I don't care if it takes 8 years. That's usual in these kind of consent decrees. What I do care about is when I see a diminution of progress between the 11th, 12th, and 13th report. That upsets me because I want to see an upward curve, and I want to see everybody pulling at the same oar. You know, Judge Browning said the decree isn't going anywhere. Sean Willoughby can put all the poster boards he wants up, and the decree isn't going to get anywhere. Browning doesn't care about that. And we need to get on the same page. And if it's, you know, we might not like being on the same page, but we might not like being on the same boat, but we got to pull at the same oar.
Yeah.
If we pull at the same oar, okay.
The APOA,
and you can and the police department and I've been reading articles.
I shouldn't have to put up my hand. We're just diverting a little bit from the topic at hand. But if you need to say some more, we will be having Mr. Willoughby back.
Okay. Then
I'll save it.
We'll save it for later. Okay.
Let's save it for later, because right now we're talking about officer safety, and we are coming close to the end of this discussion. Okay. If anybody on the council has any more questions concerned with officer safety for any of the panel, speak now.
I have a question for Mr. Willoughby. He mentioned that perhaps the CPC or all 6 CPCs could help in bringing about a forensic study of the staffing that's appropriate for APD. And I wouldn't know where to start trying to get that done without knowing what's actually been done before. Has there been any study other than just saying we need 1,000 officers? Is that based on a study, or is that just somebody's feeling?
The study you're referring to is called the WISE study. So part of the CASA is that Albuquerque was required to do a staffing study when this first began 7 years ago. You can find it online. It's the WISE, a WISE, Albuquerque Police Department staffing study. We had major reservations with that staffing study 6 years ago when it was produced. We thought it was a very bland, vanilla look at our staffing woes. It didn't pay any accommodation to investigative units like narcotics and gangs and auto theft and impact detectives. It primarily looked at square footage of the city of Albuquerque, number of calls, and primarily focused on calls for service. The study was conducted in a very common way. It didn't really take into account the exponential increase of workload administratively that we have on our officers. What I can do is I can get you a copy of the University of Houston staffing study, and I can get you a copy of the WISE study, and you can look at both of those and understand completely what I'm referring to. The other thing that I think is necessary in the city of Albuquerque, and the APOA is very seriously looking at, is starting a campaign, maybe not this election cycle, but the next, to actually make a change to the city charter to have a responsible number of police officers per resident in the city of Albuquerque by city charter, which would give the citizens of this community the ability to not only have a law to fall back on to hold the administration or any administration accountable, but require the city of Albuquerque administration today, tomorrow, and indefinitely to ensure that that number is adhered to and whatever they have to do, because it's a problem. You have to invest in recruiting and you have to invest in retention. That is a very dynamic issue that most people can talk a lot about, but they don't want to pay for it. So having something in the city charter would actually be a good step forward to holding the city accountable, to ensuring that not even for today, but into the future, there is a respectable, adequate number of Albuquerque police officers on the street for the community that they serve. And those are two things that I think CPCs could help with greatly. As we're winding it down, Rowan, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you one thing. The Albuquerque, there's a lot of misconception and there's a lot of questions, and we may not agree. Like Mr. Smith, I didn't get to any of your questions. You can get my cell phone number for Rowan. We'll go out to lunch. You can bring your whole crew. I was gonna cook you guys lunch when you were coming to the APOA office, but you changed the time on me. We need to have a conversation, and regardless of whether we agree or disagree, it's important to know where everybody stands. We're going to be inviting all of the CPCs to a function at the APOA for a presentation and kind of a mixer, so that those questions can be asked in a nice format that's not filled with drama and disgust. Hopefully we don't get shut down again before we're able to organize that and get the invite to you all. But I am always available. Rowan knows my cell phone number. I will take your calls. I will talk to you as long as you're willing to talk to me. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And as I say, that Sean will be back even September or October. I just wanted to point out that we have people here that are specifically addressing officer safety. Not that Sean wasn't, but if there's any other comments from any other panelists that they'd like to say before we move on to our next agenda item, now is your time. Well, in that case, if any of you, oh, Athena, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Lieutenant Tapia, are officers trained in respect how to deal with people that have different health concerns, like say people who are hearing impaired or people who have eyesight concerns? Are officers trained how to approach these groups to assist them?
Yes, actually, thank you for bringing that up. I failed to mention it earlier, so thank you. Yes, so officers are trained to work with and address various situations. You know, any type of disabilities and different approaches that we can take to those situations in handling calls. So yes.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Garcia, you're the ambassadors program head or supervisor. I know you're going to discuss or have discussions with various groups, but following along the line of the question to Lieutenant Tapia, are you going to visit groups that do have hearing or that do have physical impairments, hearing impaired, sight impaired? I live in the neighborhood where there is a sight impaired school. It's elementary to high school, and I'm fortunate enough to be invited to judge their annual science fair. So I'm wondering, do you approach these groups also in as part of your ambassadors program?
Yes, and thank you for that question. I actually do have 3 ambassadors who are assigned to the ADA community. The reason they have so many is because, you know, Americans with Disabilities encompasses a wide variety of individuals. And in fact, I want to say 2 weeks ago, they did reach out to the Commission for the Blind. We do work with New Mexico Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We work with the city, who has a lot of contacts, and we are incorporating that into training our cadets when we meet with them for lunch, and any other training that they believe, like I said earlier, they believe that our officers need.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, if there's anybody that you want to put in contact with me, please do so, and I'll make sure somebody reaches out to them.
I also wanted to ask, the Mexican Council that is in my neighborhood, I live in the Wells Park neighborhood, and they attended one of our CPC meetings, but I'm wondering, are you approaching them also as part of your program?
Yes, and we have, I want to say, 2 officers assigned to work with them. I also know that Chief Medina and I believe Commander Sanchez, I'm not sure about Deputy Chief Brown, but they also attend their meetings regularly. And I don't know, DC Brown, if you could have any more information on that.
Yeah, we've attended the last 2 in a row. Commander Sanchez, and there's a couple of other officers who do a great job in kind of relaying our message to the Mexican consulate. We just recently got to where our Twitter page, some of our social media is going to be translated directly off from what we put out into Spanish, so it reaches more of the community. They've also been getting more of their business groups together, almost like an Arapa coalition, and kind of bringing them in. One of the things we had last time was a good conversation, and it was kind of eye-opening when they say, you know, there's some of them are scared to call the police because they're afraid that we're working with Border Patrol or ICE or somebody to get them deported. One of the things that I had to reaffirm them of us is, you know, it's against our policy, and we're there to serve their community as well as everybody else.
Okay, thank you. And Commander Brown, I wanted to ask you, and also Commander Norris, when I know officer safety is important to all of us, when officers are involved in a critical incident, such as when the 4 officers were injured, how, I know you are very specific about protecting our officers, but how do you protect citizens that may be in the area?
You know, if you look at that call and you look at the scene that was involved in that, I don't know if anybody on this Zoom has seen there was a Facebook post that somebody shared with me. I don't even have Facebook, but I was able to pull it up on a link, and it was a gunfight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a downright gunfight. That guy had a couple of extended magazines and a Glock 17 and was putting a lot of rounds down range. Those officers were cognizant of that. That's part of their training is you know, knowing what their backdrop is, knowing when they're engaging someone, and being shot at. You know, and we've had another instance where I'm on the first review board, and we were looking at a case where one of the officers was saying was involved in a shooting where the guy was pointing a gun at him on numerous times. They're in a foot chase, and he never engaged that person because of the backdrop of the civilians behind him.
Okay.
I mean, it's taken into consideration, and I think they did a great job out there. And I'd like to point out that none of the officers, but we had a 19-year-old PSA who stepped up and applied a tourniquet to Officer Eichel, and more than likely saved his life. I mean, she has no gun, no formal medical training, and you know, she stepped up. I mean, everybody always says people rise to the occasion, and you know, I think, you know, when it comes to training, most people fall back to their highest level of training they've ever received. But
she was on the
did a great job.
Yeah, she was on the evening news and was recognized by Chief Medina and the mayor this evening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. Thank you, everyone.
Anything
Add
else?
something to the training aspect?
Please.
Yes. This goes back to yesterday with the cadets as well. They had also 8 hours of diversity and cultural awareness for the particular communities throughout the city. So for example, the Muslim community, the Asian community, the transgender community, things of that nature. And that is going to continue on with our cultural diversity person in the department. Overall for APD. She's not in the academy, but she's in the department. So I just wanted to add that. I think that's very important for the council to be aware of as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Now that APD is shifting more and more towards community policing, will there be community policing specific training at the academy? Is that a plan?
And I'm sorry, Rowan, my computer broke up just a little bit. Was that community policing training?
Yeah. will there be a, I mean, as it's supposed, will there be a plan for having a course with an emphasis on that, or at least a reference in one of the classes, or some kind of exercise or something?
Yes, so we already do incorporate quite a bit in terms of community-oriented policing training in our basic academy. It is part of annual training our field training officers get. We do incorporate it in supervisor training, and then it is reinforced through the on-the-job training.
Okay.
So yes, we do have a focus on that.
So thank you so much. I believe you've, oh,
I have one more question. I'm sorry.
Edwina.
I have one more question. Are the cadets given an overview of the CASA during their training?
Yes, I can't remember the exact length of it, but they do discuss the CASA, as well as when they're receiving specific areas of instruction, they review the relevant portion of the CASA.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, anybody we're just going to go into, Jacqueline, you have something else?
Just a quick request. If anyone has this information, I think Ro and I had stated something about this to you, going back again to staffing being such a part of safety, having adequate numbers. What is the level of dangerousness for police officers in our community compared to other communities this size? Colorado Springs was mentioned, other places. I'd be very interested in that, because I think we need to know that to be helpful. So if anyone has that kind of information or knows where to find that, I greatly appreciate it if you would get that info back to us.
We'll make sure that happens. So we have, I can't even see, 25 more minutes, and we normally use this time to address area command concerns. So anybody that was on the panel that doesn't feel the need to be here anymore, feel free to step off. It was wonderful having you, and thank you for what seemed to be a useful and constructive conversation. And interesting that a crime actually took place and a cat nearly died during this conversation. So as soon as I get offline, I'm going to call 242 cops and report the incident. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Ron. Have a good night.
Can you believe that? Can you believe that I actually saw someone come on my porch? I got this huge package from Amazon earlier on, and it was only on the porch for about 20 minutes, about 5 or 6 hours ago. And I mean, I got it in really quickly, but that means that whoever this person was cruises around looking for packages on porches and makes a note of them all. I mean, it was obvious what he was doing. He got on the porch and he looked all around my porch. Oh, it might have been something different, but I'll check and see. I just realized it might not be that at all, so I won't call 242 cops, but it was an interesting thing. I will contact the person who I think it might be. So, Laura, what's happening in our command area?
Hello, I'm Laura Trujillo, the Valley Crime Prevention Specialist, and I do have the property crimes for the whole Valley Area Command from 7/23 to 8/23. There were 24 commercial burglaries, 13 residential burglaries, 43 vehicle burglaries, 71 auto thefts, 32 recovered vehicles, 3 robberies by carjacking, 9 commercial robberies, and 4 robberies by gunpoint. Are there any questions on that?
That's a busy month. That's much busier than usual. Can you think of any reason why it would be that intense this month? Heat?
Usually, it's just summer months. Summer months are always busy citywide. It's just summertime is a tough. Everybody thinks it's the holidays. Oh, you guys, I bet it gets crazy around the holidays. No, it don't. It's the summertime where it gets crazy. So that's where we see the most uptick of our calls citywide. But that's kind of what we're seeing.
Is there an awareness, Laura, as I always ask you, of any specific areas that were more impacted than others?
I did run the hotspots this time for the same time period. The hotspots were around Candelaria and I-25, Locust Place and the Big I, Lomas and Woodward Place, 2nd Street and Gold Avenue. Those were the highest amounts of hotspots that came up on the map.
So with the exception of 2nd and Gold, all of them were very close to the freeway.
Yes, and I think that's because it makes an easy getaway because they can just hop onto the freeway and go to any state from there. So, and there's a lot of hotels, motels along the freeway too.
What did you say the number of hijackings were? Car
hijackings? There were 3.
Oh, 3. Okay.
Yes.
And no assaults?
I only run the property crimes.
Oh, okay.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Edwina. You're muted.
You're muted, Edwina.
Do you track the, or Commander Norris, do you track the shot spotter incidents?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a meeting every day, 8:45 in the morning, with any crime really that has to do with a gun. So, and we go over that. So, our coverage areas obviously they're a little, they're very localized. So that, like I said, we don't have them all around the city. So, or not all around the city, all around the area command. They're localized, mostly downtown. But we actually don't get a lot of, to tell you the truth, I don't get a lot of indications downtown of a lot of shots being fired. So.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Commander Norris, do you have anything to add? Anything to report?
Nothing to add or report. The new bid starts on Saturday. We we're anxious for that. Just to kind of allude to what Commander Brown was talking about with regard to staffing issues and things like that. So they took 3, and for the reform effort, right, they took 3 of my swing shift officers out of one squad to put them in IAFD, which leaves me with brings 3 swing shift officers to work the weekends. So that's 2 to 12. And then they took another one actually to help with the COVID uptick. So that leaves me with 2 officers in one squad to work Saturdays and Sundays to serve everybody on this panel. Okay. So he helped me out with that, which is good. But those are the types of staffing issues that a lot of people don't quite understand that we have, is those resources get pulled from the field to with whatever other issues are going on in the department. Whether it be, I had to give an officer up to help with reality-based training type stuff. So I had to give 3 officers up to IAFD for use of force investigations. Had to give another officer up to the COVID unit so they can help out with that. All in the meantime, I've had 7 officers resign or retire within the past 2 months. So it's a struggle. And it's something that we're trying to negotiate and trying to deal with the best that we can. And it's prioritizing your priorities, you know. both of our main priorities are cost compliance and reducing violent crime and property crime in the city. So it's trying to find out how do we balance that relative to the staffing that we have.
Commander, what is the COVID unit?
So basically, we have to have a unit of officers that help coordinate the testing of officers who may be symptomatic, help coordinate the decontamination of vehicles, decontamination of city properties where officers are housed out of. So we don't have civilians to run that right now. So we have to pull from sworn resources to help that out.
Is the long term, as long as COVID lasts anyway, is the plan to get civilian people into those roles?
I don't have an answer for you on that, sir. I don't know. I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commander Norris, on a positive note, one of my daughters turned 40 this last week. I believe it was a Friday. It was a Friday night, and she and I think 7 or 8 girlfriends went downtown. They were at Hotel Andaluz, and they were very impressed. The number of officers that were around the area. They all left around 10 or 10:30, and they were commenting on it, how safe they felt being downtown. So I wanted to give you that feedback.
Well, that makes me very happy. That's part of our downtown clothing kind of initiative that we're doing, and we're pulling from a lot of other resources from the department to help out with that. So that's the intent. It's to make downtown a more hospitable place. It's to make it a safer place. It's to help deter crime. It's to help to enforce the law. So that's great feedback to hear. I'm glad to hear that. And I hope that we can continue with it. Just to kind of give you an idea, that presence may ramp down a little bit downtown because we do have State Fair coming up. We do have Balloon Fiesta coming up. So we have to allocate those resources towards these larger events.
There's still a regular officer presence at the Growers Market, right? Do they come from other command areas, or is it mainly Valley people?
No, it's all Valley area command.
Okay. I just remember a rather serious incident that happened a couple of years ago. There was a homeless gentleman who had a pair of scissors and was threatening one of the stall holders, and at that point it was the end of the market, and at that point there were no officers there. So if there are officers removed, if they're not there, it's safe to assume that they're somewhere far more serious, that they haven't just gone on some kind of regular patrol or something, that they stay right through till 12 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay. Rena.
I'd also like to thank Commander Norris and his officers for keeping Wells Park so nice and clean. I went by there one afternoon and I looked at the park, and it was beautiful. The sun was shining, the grass looked green. It's a beautiful park, Wells Park.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's not only just us. I have to give credit where credit's due. There's a lot of other departments around the city, whether it be solid waste, whether it be family community services, whether it be Metro Security, that's assisting in that effort. And they should be, because it's not just a law enforcement issue, right? There's a lot of other things that need a service outside of law enforcement that can better serve these individuals. So our next concentration is going to be, we're still going to be concentrating on Wells Park, but our next concentration, though, is going to be Coronado Park. We have to get control of Coronado Park. It's out of control, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, it's sad. It's essentially a lost park, and the dog park is lost too. I used to take my dog regularly to the dog park, but I don't anymore. I take him to another dog park because the park makes me nervous. Doesn't make him nervous. He don't care, but makes me nervous. That's very good to hear about the Coronado Park, and I'm sure Edwina's happy to hear about it, as that's in her neighborhood.
Yes, it is.
Does anybody else, speaking of neighborhood, while we've still got some time, does anybody have some specific neighborhood concerns? Any unusual activity? Anything untoward?
Can I answer Vicki Williams's question just really quick? It was about the COVID unit. No, that COVID unit is for the entire department. Each area command does not have its specific COVID unit.
Okay. Dick, we're in the same neighborhood. Has everything been fine as far as you can tell in our neighborhood? I actually found some works for a pipe on my median recently, which concerned me because I thought that kind of thing doesn't happen. But I'm on a sort of wayward block of the neighborhood anyway. I've seen people sleeping in the neighborhood a few times. Yeah, I know. What can you do? I saw one sleeping and I just went, this is important. You know, if you see somebody sleeping, go up to them and make sure their chests are rising to know they're still alive. It's not going to take too long. And it's a decent service. Actually, speaking of that, what are the plans for Coronado Park? What do you see yourself accomplishing?
Removing all encampments, period.
Huh.
So, officer, moving what?
The encampments.
Where are you going to move them?
Well, that's something that we have to use additional resources with, but it's against the law to camp in a park. It's a city ordinance that you cannot do that. And what these individuals are doing is they are putting the safety of others that are trying to maintain the park in jeopardy. We have our solid waste, we have Parks and Rec go in there that try and irrigate, try and water. These individuals are subject to people throwing rocks at them, threatening them, telling them to get out of their park. It's unacceptable. And it needs to be addressed, and it's going to be addressed accordingly. We will address it. We will address it by providing these individuals with other resources, with other departments around the city, Family Community Services, Albuquerque Community Service. That's going to be their job. Our job is going to be for law enforcement.
I'm on the Homeless Advisory Council, and it's interesting that approach is fairly recent, because I think there was something about no police presence and removing encampments, or is that
there's going to be a new there's a new encampment policy that actually the city of Albuquerque is drafting.
Okay.
But regardless of the policy doesn't trump the city ordinance. It's okay. You cannot erect a structure in a public park and use that as your home. It's against the law.
So will you be addressing the structures that are around the park?
Yes, we're trying our best. Yep.
Ones that are outside Hope Works as well.
We're trying to address all encampments right now. Like I said, it's kind of an effort that's encompassing a lot of departments around the city, because like I said, it's not just a law enforcement issue, and that's not something that we want to make it. Law enforcement is an integral part of helping that, but we also aren't trying to make these things punitive. We're trying to serve the needs of the rest of the individuals, where I get probably about 6 or 7 complaints a day about encampments. And we need to try and find, a balance between enforcing the law, but getting these individuals the help that they need, while also not allowing these types of things to prevent law-abiding citizens from using a park that they want to use.
Thank you. I remember after the Journal article about it a couple of years ago, some families went in the next day, sort of trying to reclaim it, taking walks on it, and there were kids on skateboards on the skateboard ramp. And I thought that looked really promising, but it only happened for a couple of days, and then, they went away again. But that would be good. Years and years ago, I got off I-40 drove between the two parks, and the skateboard park was full of skateboarders and the dog park was full of dogs. And it looked amazing. I didn't live in this area then. So it was just, it looked so, and both parks were really well kept and looked really good. So getting back to that is going to be a challenge, but it would be nice.
It's going to be very challenging. It's going to be very challenging.
Very challenging. I mean, this was, God, 1998 or something like that. It was that long ago. So when did they start degenerating, Edwina, those two parks? You muted.
Maybe 34 years ago. I really don't know. I don't know.
And I know it was because it came up at a long ago CPC meeting that people were complaining about the bus picking up people from the shelter outside HopeWorks. The businesses around there were complaining about it. So that was why the bus was moved up to Coronado Park. Didn't stay outside HopeWorks. So, you know, and that seems to have created a whole bigger world of hurt.
Is there any effort, is there any thought of the city buying a campground and making, designating an area, either an old warehouse area or a parking lot area or a vacant lot where homeless can go to have encampments, and maybe some toilet facilities as well? And then that way, you know, you could clear out the parks and have maybe some areas where the homeless can live.
Well, there is the tiny homes that was opened up recently. And I don't know if you saw the article in the journal about it, but it can take, I forget, 30 people, maybe more. And there's only 6 people living in it.
No, I think, yeah, I mean, tiny homes are one solution, but a lot of people, as I understand it at least, don't want to live in tiny homes. But they might live in a place which is dedicated for an encampment. I don't know. I mean, you know, it's a problem. I think it's going to be with us for a long time. And I sympathize with the fact that we don't want our parks taken over by encampments, but I also sympathize with the need for them to have encampments. I mean, you know, in a way, there's more serious crime to deal with, and if we could find a solution for that, loitering or trespassing or whatever we want to call it, where we make it essentially a legal place for them. You know, there's warehouses on out on 2nd Street at 1st Street that appear to be abandoned. There was a burnt out warehouse on, I think, Indian School and 2nd. And those places could be refurbished. They have roofs so that they're dry, and turn them into sort of encampments. It's a problem we all have, and I don't think moving the problem necessarily is solving the problem.
Some county commissioners have proposed constructing an area for encampments. I'm not sure if it'll get on the agenda anytime soon. I suspect it will, though. And that'll be interesting. There will certainly be a lot of issues surrounding a city or county provided encampment, law enforcement being one of the big ones, and sanitation. But maybe the county will do something.
Well, it's 2 minutes to 8 o'clock. I hope that was a constructive meeting. It was not very well attended meeting by the public, unfortunately, but we will have the recording and the links out as soon as possible.
Rowan, we're supposed to have a vote on a secretary.
Oh my God, you're right. Let's do this right now. I'm sorry.
Everybody have a great rest of your meeting. Let me know if you need anything. Everybody's got my email address.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commander.
Thank you, Commander.
Thanks,
Laura.
Me.
Thanks. We'll see you. Good night.
Just deeply look forward to the time when I'm not going to be chair anymore and someone more organized will be in charge. I'm looking at all of you, incidentally, because my term is coming. My term is coming up.
We're not going to let you leave.
I don't know about that. I'd let me leave. I'd let me leave in a heartbeat. So
we need the historical component of this.
Edwina, you'll have Edwina.
Yes.
Leave.
Yes. Yes.
And not be chair. Co-chair. That's all. Somebody else needs to co-chair with Edwina, or Edwina might drop down to vice. Edwina can do whatever she feels like doing. She's got enough meetings in her life, but I'm just saying that I apologize for my lack of organization and my scattered brainness. I'm never happy with the way I run these meetings. Never.
I think they've been just fine. I think we've learned a lot, and I think we've made progress. And I think we should take this vote and go on for the evening.
Yeah, but I asked just really quickly, if you're still here, Steve, I asked you privately if we could meet with you and Kelly, to have a conversation about our terrible attendance and how we can do it differently. So if you and Kelly could maybe discuss that, and if the rest of you are open for it, if we could have a meeting with Steve and Kelly to talk about that, because it's getting more and more depressing each month. But let's go with the vote on appointing Tom as secretary. And thank you, Tom. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So who wants to move to appoint Tom for secretary?
I so move.
Second? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
With gratitude.
With lots of gratitude. So Martessa, if you could start sending the minutes to Tom from now on, rather than to me and to Edwina. So he'll be the one reviewing the minutes and sending you back the revisions, and you'll send them around us, of course.
Okay, I can go ahead and start doing that.
Maybe one glorious happy day, Tom, when we can meet in person, you can come and wrestle with my computer and get the mailing list and all that fun stuff.
Okay.
So we'll work on that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's call it a night.
Okay.
Move we adjourn.
Good evening, everyone.
To adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, second.
Aye.
Aye.
And we'll have a chance to talk. You know, I'm a little concerned about the attendance as well, but I think more importantly, the quality of the sessions are really, really good. You are recording them. I think, you know, it's August, and I think you're going to run into a bit of a slowdown anyway.
3 people, Steve. 3 people.
Yeah, but yeah.
The worst, we haven't done as badly as that for a long time.
We were up to 50, 60, 70 people at one time in some places.
Yeah.
We'll get it back. We just need to do a little bit more outreach. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, but it would be nice to talk with you and come up with some brainstorming things. That would be really helpful.
Love you, baby. We can set it up.
Okay. All right. Good night, Kelly and Martessa. You're going to finally get home and relax, or relax in the home you are in. Good night, the rest of you.
Good night.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.